So hi everyone, my name's Emily Popham and I work for North Highland, which is a consultancy who worked with the DfT earlier this year on the local transport data discovery project. So I'm here to talk about the results from that project. I'll briefly go through what we did, go through our key findings, and importantly go through what our recommendations and what's happening now. So firstly, the brief. This is the brief we were given. In a nutshell, what we were looking to do is understand what benefits could be realised by greater sharing of transport data. We had a group of SMEs, including Nick and Teresa, who I can see here, who helped us understand the statement of what transport data has the most value, who is that data valuable to, and why. And if we understand that, we can therefore understand what the opportunities and challenges are to really further share that data. The first question I tend to get asked is, what do you mean by transport data? So this is a visual illustration of the scope of the project. And as you can see, it included everything from mobile phone data through to pedestrian data and everything in between. In terms of who were the users who were involved in the project, we spoke to over 173 individuals over the 12-week project. And that was across 94 public and private sector organisations. So the primary user group for local authority transport data is, of course, the local authorities themselves. We spoke to 28 local authorities. The map here shows the local authorities we spoke to, and we tried to make sure we had a representative sample across England, but also in terms of rural and urban local authorities. So it will obviously impact their data needs and how they use transport data. We then shifted to have a look at the private sector and how they use transport data, focusing on the technology providers and data aggregators. You can see there's a high number of organisations there, and that included the likes of Uber, TomTom, Citymapper, Transport API, Inrix and the likes. And you can see a number of other industries that we covered as part of the study. So in terms of how we carried out the research, we use a number of qualitative and quantitative methods. We focused on doing primary user research through user interviews, but we also did a number of workshops and events, as well as a survey and a data assessment. And this was really looking at local authorities, what transport data they had, how open it was, and how important different data sets were to them. So moving on to the key findings. What did we find? The suspense. Okay. Firstly, there are potential commercial and societal benefits for open data, as clearly shown by Transport for London, but there is currently limited commercial value associated with most local authority data. So the societal benefits are clear, whether that's increased network efficiency, the improved customer and citizens' experience of being able to plan journeys, plan multimodal journeys, or the environmental impact, being able to understand the impact of air quality policies from transport data. But in terms of the commercial value, we found that it was currently limited for a number of reasons I'm going to talk through. Although we did find pockets of excellence within regions and within specific local authorities, much of the market is really dominated by the private sector, and this is both in terms of data collection and data usage, and they're increasingly having a big influence over how people and goods are travelling across the network. But where we did see a huge amount of success is, as also been shown this morning by Oxfordshire and West Midlands, is where there was collaboration with the private sector, with universities and other government departments. And this is combining data sets and creating new data sets, as Luella mentioned around with Milton Keynes and Vivacity, in actually creating new data sets. And obviously using the skills and expertise within the private sector and universities was helpful as well. The data assessment we carried out found a huge amount of local authority data is closed. There are barriers to obviously open the data up. There are internal barriers such as understanding compliance and regulation for opening data, such as GDPR, which we all know a lot about these days. But also external barriers as well. So a lot of the data is outsourced to third parties and may be stored and maintained by those third parties, which is obviously reducing the ability to open that data themselves. And what we did find is maybe an obvious conclusion around traffic data is the most valuable data set to both the private sector and local authorities. So this is the real-time traffic data used to manage the road networks, and across all the stakeholders we spoke to, this was the priority data set to be opened up. We also found investment is required to improve both data quality and the standardisation of local authority data. So data quality, we found some local authorities were using assets and infrastructure that was aging, and actually the data quality itself was not at the level that it could be commercially exploited. And also standardisation, certain data sets, for example, traffic regulation orders, there's a huge amount of standardisation to be done to that raw data before it can have any longer term value. We found a significant volume and breadth of transport data. Our data assessment had hundreds of different data sets, and there are thousands, if not millions, of data points within those data sets. And that only further emphasises the need to really have a focused approach on what data sets that we should be opening up. And I guess a combination of those first 2 points in terms of the quality and standardisation of data and the vast amounts of transport data out there means that local authorities, have not all fully developed their approach for transport data for the future. And there's some great examples today of what has been done in terms of supporting connected and autonomous vehicles. But lastly, we found a huge enthusiasm across the local authorities around progressing the open data agenda, but what we heard loud and clear is they really wanted support and guidance as to how they can actually go around doing this and direction. So what was our recommendations and what is happening now? So there's a huge amount of detail behind these recommendations, which I'm not going to be able to get through in this 10-minute slot, but please do speak to me today or in advance if you have any questions or want to discuss anything in more detail. But I'm going to go through the 5 key recommendations we made as part of the study. So the first recommendation was local authorities should be helped to focus on making more high-quality data open. And there are 3 elements to this. Firstly, it's around communication and engagement. It's around using community groups such as the TDI to communicate and prioritise the roadmap and priorities from the DFT. Secondly, it's about support. The DFT are creating a centrally funded data team, which will be able to help in deliver data projects across local authorities. And thirdly, it's about guidance, so creating open data guidance, and that's working with the local authorities to create that guidance. So local authorities have direction in terms of what data initiatives and investments they should be making. The second recommendation was the Department for Transport should sponsor identified data projects which encourage and foster better local authority transport services. So this is more the big programmes of activity that need to be undertaken to enable transport to work. I'm actually going to not talk through these as I know Transport Systems Catapult are going to be talking next. And that's talking to the first point around creating the future mobility platform for local authorities. And also Innovate UK are going to be talking about an exciting competition and grant that's been mentioned already today around creating a connected vehicle data exchange platform. The third recommendation is around more effective investment in infrastructure to harvest local authority data and open data initiatives to improve data sharing. So there's 2 parts to this. So this is firstly around more effective spend on infrastructure. So it's giving local authorities help in terms of the infrastructure decisions they're making to make sure they're making the most cost-effective decisions. And secondly, this is around financial investment, so increasing the number of grants and competitions that the DFT sponsor to enable to test and validate new use cases for how to open up local authority transport data. Recommendation 4 was around promoting skills and training, developing that within local authorities so they can develop internal capability. Again, there's 2 elements to this. Firstly, it's around data procurement, so the skills and training required to ensure that when there are third-party contracts, the data ownership rights are within the local authorities to enable them to own and open up their data. And secondly, around data skills and capability itself. This is not something specific to the transport industry, but it's around building those in-house data scientists and data skills so they can progress their data agenda. And lastly, recommendation 5 was around improving collaboration between local authorities, Highways England and the private sector. So the fragmented landscape of the local authority structure has meant it's really hard to access transport data. So really this is about promoting cross-sector and boundary collaboration. It's about using these subnational transport groups, such as Transport for the North, England's economic heartland, to really promote collaboration and to use them to share in, projects and initiatives across local authority boundaries. And also working with projects with Highways England, which is already underway as well. This is a discovery roadmap which we put together for the DFT, which shows the 5 recommendations, and it's a number of actions and projects for how the DFT and the industry as a whole can make these recommendations real. So just to summarise back those 5 key recommendations, it's about allowing local authorities to focus on high quality data open. It's around the Department for Transport sponsoring key data projects. It's around ensuring the investment in the infrastructure itself is effective and that there's financial incentives to work on open data projects. It's about promoting the skills and training development within the local authorities to develop that internal capability. And lastly, it's around collaboration. That's between different local authorities and regions and with Highways England and the private sector. So thank you, that was a very whistle-stop tour. Please do speak to me after or at some point today if you have any questions. I'm also here with my colleague Chris Clark as well, who you can talk to about the study. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much, Emma.